Hello and welcome to Breaking the Cycle. My name is Alan Hyde, and I'll be your guide tonight as we venture into the world of mental health, therapy, recovery, and spirituality. I want to thank you for joining us on a Friday night, and also a special thanks to our producer T for joining us. How are you doing, T?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate your help and assistance with the technological stuff. I
Yeah.
have no clue what I'm doing. So, on this show, we're going to be talking about mental health and recovery. And I figured what we'll do is we'll start with what I call tonight's tool. And I have people write in and suggest tools that we use on this show to share with our community. And I had a gentleman, his name is George, out of Huntington Beach, California. And he sent in a tool that he uses often in his recovery and mental health. And he calls it AAA. And AAA is awareness, acceptance, and action, right? Not the roadside assistance, but awareness, acceptance, and action in our recovery is extremely important, and in our mental health. But how George uses it is when he's having a problem in his life, he asks himself, "Am I aware of what the problem is? Am I aware of what my part is in this situation?" And once he has a clear idea of what the problem is and his awareness of it, he asks, is this something that I can accept in my life, or is this something that I have a hard time accepting? At that point, typically, maybe he'll jump in and try to talk to somebody else. Maybe he'll talk to his therapist. Maybe he'll talk to a sponsor in his recovery program, or talk to a trusted friend. But he tries to find his way to acceptance of this problem. And at that point, when he's found some acceptance around the problem, he jumps into action. And we'll get a little bit more into that, but I thought maybe this would be a good time to check in with you, T. Are there any coping skills that when you're having a hard day that you like to use?
I'm actually going to say this from a Christian standpoint.
Okay.
I try to spend as much time with God as possible,
Yeah.
meditating on His Word, meditating on who He calls me to be, just so that I can ground myself and refocus on the positive things
Yeah.
in life.
Yeah. Absolutely. I like that a lot. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm one of those therapists in my practice that believes in the practicality of God, right?
Okay.
And especially, like when I reflect on what George wrote in as well, we can't have awareness when our ego is so involved,
Yeah.
One of my friends was telling me ego is edging God out. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, when things happen in our lives that are difficult, I think, well, in my clinical practice, I hear a lot of times it's like, I can't believe this is happening to me, or, if there was a God, this wouldn't happen, and it's difficult, right? Because I guess from the standpoint of like coping with difficult things, it's kind of like God can bless or block it,
Right.
And I want to be clear as well. So my background, I've been a clinician for 11 years. I've worked primarily with my specialty in treating those struggling with substance use and overall family members of those individuals struggling with substances. We call it the family disease of alcoholism. And a lot of my work clinically is helping people find 12-step recovery and helping them find effective coping strategies in their life. And so, God is a pretty typical part of the conversation, but I always try to remind people, you can define that however you want.
Right.
It doesn't have to be the word God, if that's uncomfortable. Obviously T and I have no problem discussing God and using that word. And so if you're listening and you find that a little difficult, just know you're in good company. And we understand how that goes, and you're still loved, right? You're not alone in your struggles and in your journey, and you can find help, whatever your struggle is, and that there is something more out there. I think I was listening to a podcast earlier this week, and the host was talking a little bit about he was like, it was like he was struck by lightning, when he found out that there was this concept out there that he could tap into that loved him unconditionally, right? That loved him no matter what, whether he was making mistakes, no matter, the struggles in his life, the mistakes that he had made, the people he had hurt, or if he was doing good things in his life. that higher power was going to love him. And this gentleman just so happened to be in recovery himself. And, you know, I'm unconvinced as a clinician that there's really any alternative that's better than a higher power to treat substance use. So if you're out there and you're a friend or a family member of somebody who's struggling with substance use, it's good to shed light on that, because that's going to be an inevitable road for them. They're going to have to turn their lives over to a higher power. But another thing too worth considering is that the family member on the other end of that is going to have to turn their lives over to a higher power, because I don't know about you, T, but when someone's struggling in my life, the hardest thing to do is to let go.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. It's difficult.
It is, because you want to do your best to help.
Yeah.
You know. So.
Yeah. I struggle with, I don't know if you can relate to this or if you guys can relate to this. I struggle with trying to control, you know, like,
Oh, yes.
I see them doing something bad. I think I know what's better.
Yes.
The reality is some higher power greater than me knows what's better, but I'm not going to give that the time of day when I think I can step in. All right. Yeah.
That's the same for me. I struggle with control, and it's been kind of hard to step back and realize, like, this, it's not about you or what you can do, you know, so I definitely understand that.
Yeah. It's, you don't have to answer this, but do you go to therapy or anything like that?
No, but I
I'm gonna
have
talk her
been
into
wanting to for a long time. And so I'm so glad I finally met someone and
Yeah.
I met you. So
Yeah, Friday nights at 7.
Yes.
Come in and have some free therapy conversations. And so can you guys.
it looks like we have a phone call coming in.
Do we really?
We do.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm going
let's
to
take
answer it.
All right.
Let me answer. Hello.
Founder of Fishbowl Studio.
Hi.
I just want to welcome Alan. It's his first debut show.
Thank you, Sammy. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm watching next to you. I'm in my office, but we just want to welcome you to the Fishbowl family. And we're so excited that you are a part of the network and that you're going to be able to help really hundreds of thousands of listeners from around the world listen to the network from all over the world and all over the U.S., of course, as well. And so we're really excited of having you on. So thank you for joining us, and have a great first show.
Well, thank you, Sammy. I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to being involved.
All right. Great first show.
All right.
All
thank
right.
you.
Well, we'll be listening. Thanks, guys. Have a good show. Bye.
Thanks, Sammy. Yeah. Well, that was cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we jump back into what George sent in, here's a key to AAA, all right? Awareness, acceptance, action. We got to be really honest with ourselves. And there's this concept I use in my clinical practice called radical honesty. You know, you got to get really clear on what you're struggling with. And for some people that's journaling. For some people it's, you know, talking in a therapeutic process. For some people it's talking with friends, you know, but if we're not honest with ourselves, right, how are we going to gain the awareness to actually tackle the real problem?
Yeah.
Yeah. You ever, I'm getting real deep with you here tonight. You ever struggle with honesty?
Oh, yes. I think we all do to some extent, because we know that if we become honest with ourselves, it's going to hit us upside the head a little bit. It's going to be a scary sight. But yeah, I definitely struggle with that sometimes.
Yeah. When I first started with my therapist, I've been seeing her not every single week we're going on 5 years. And when I first came to her and I started to lay out my problems, or like, you know, what I perceived as problems or whatever the struggles were, she had made some recommendations to me, and I came in the next week and I hadn't done any of them. And she looked at me and she said, "I'm unwilling to take your money if you're unwilling to do the work to get better." It rocked me to my core. It's like that night I went and started working on the things that she had suggested.
Yeah.
And I share that because, you know, when we're seeking support, I think we live in a society today too where it's like everything is validated. And I like validation, like it's important. It's an important piece. I'm a therapist. I'm going to validate your feelings when you're telling me what you're feeling, and at the same time, my job as a therapist is to hold up for you what the struggles are. Right. And so, if you come to me and you tell me, I've got a problem with so-and-so, my first question is probably going to be something like, what's your part in it?
Right.
Again, that may not be my my first question is probably what brings you into therapy.
Yeah.
But once we break down some of those walls, we've got to start to look at ourselves. And I don't know about you guys, and I don't know about you, T, but that is probably one of the hardest things to do is look at ourselves, and see that the problems we notice in others, it's like, I'll never forget this one. If you spot it, you got it. Right. So if you're out and about and you're having a problem with someone, or, you can pick out what somebody else is doing wrong, it's probably because you're noticing something inside of yourself that you're capable of.
Yep.
But you really would hope that you don't act that way. And some of my favorite concepts, just clinically or emotionally or in the realm of personal growth, is I'm capable of being a monster and I choose not to be.
Right.
And I think in the realms of recovery as well, right? And for those who don't know kind of what I'm talking about, there's 12-step recovery for those, whether they're struggling with substances, gambling, sex, trying to control their loved one who's struggling with all those things. We've got to recognize that they're human, and that's a big, it's something I'm really passionate about in my personal life and in my work as a clinician, is because I think a lot of times people get demonized, so if you're listening to this and you struggle with substances or your loved one struggles with substances, they're just a person, right? And they're a good person. They may be doing all kinds of weird shit, right? But they're just a good person, and they need help just like the rest of us. And I was talking with someone right before this show, actually, that what they shared with me is don't be so quick to separate yourself from everybody else in your behaviors. It's like I'll get in this place sometimes where I'll be trying to relay my struggles, and I'll tell you a story about how the human race has a problem, right? How these people over here are behaving this way, as if I'm not capable or wasn't just engaging in that too. Yeah. It's a struggle. Yeah. But yeah, if these things are landing for you, I would encourage you to reach out for help. And I'll plant this as well. On this show, we're going to be doing kind of just what T and I were talking about there is tonight's tool. So if you have a tool that you would like to recommend for me to review and to bring on the show and to unpack and talk about a little bit, I encourage you to jump over to therapy@alanhyde.com. There's a contact button. Send the email, and we'll review those coping skills. I'll bring them on the show. I'll chat with T about it. We'll have a good time, and we'll see if we can impart some of that wisdom from our community to you guys, because we recover together. Whatever it is in our lives, we recover together. What's I'm going to get you real involved tonight, too. Oh. This is perfect, because I didn't anticipate, so much the conversation with the producer, so I appreciate your willingness.
Yeah, no problem.
How would you describe your support or community?
My community?
Yeah.
Wow. I will say, honestly, some people may know who are tuned in. I have a group of ladies that we call ourselves our hood. Okay. And we stand back to back with one another. We hold each other up. We lift each other up. And honestly, for me, as someone who has searched for real love in the wrong things, those ladies have been a proper example of love to me. And so my community has, I can't even put into words how they have lifted me up and helped me and loved me when I didn't even know how to do that to myself.
It's important.
Yeah.
Well, like-minded, right? It's like, notice she didn't say, I got a bunch of dudes, right, that I'm hanging out with. She said, I've got a bunch of like-minded women that I hang out with who help me feel loved. And man, that's like, well, it's a cornerstone in my clinical practice as well. Like I just firmly believe in community.
Yes.
Like the silent killer, if you're wondering like what's a cornerstone problem in society today from a clinical perspective, and I'm full of shit sometimes, so take it with a grain of salt, is isolation and loneliness.
Yes.
That one hit.
I was going to say that. Isolation.
Yeah.
It'll put you in a place where you're like, how did I even get here? But you did it to yourself.
Yeah.
And it takes someone reaching out and holding your hand sometimes to get you out of that place.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely isolation.
It's a hard pill to swallow when when you get into that space and have to admit to yourself, like I'm doing this to myself. It's a struggle.
It is.
Yeah.
I can definitely say and I think it comes with some type of offense as well. People create, you know what I mean? And so I have put myself in isolation because I was offended from something that I just simply didn't understand. And so I feel like as a society, we need to take control of that as well,
Yeah, it's like the cliche adage of, if you want the world to be better, go home and love your family, right. Mother Teresa. Yeah. But there's a real practicality to that. It's like, we got a bunch of people. I keep bumping into this microphone. I'm going to get it right. So if you hear my beard on this microphone, bless my heart. There's a bunch of people out here driving to and from wherever they're going, and every single one of them has a life and problems, and a lot of good things in their life too. And it's up to all of them and each of us to figure out what those things are and what's keeping us from our relationships and connecting in vulnerable ways. And vulnerability is another big buzzword in the realm of mental health, and I'm a proponent of it. And I think what's important to remember about vulnerability is breaking down the distinction in relationships of the topic of intimacy. And I work with a lot of men, as I'm sure you could believe. And when I say the word intimacy, what's the first thing you think comes to their mind?
Sex.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, they think sex, but intimacy is into me see. Into me see. I'm going to share with you over time what my struggles are. And this is a big thing in relationships too. I'll have a bunch of people come in and they're looking to date, and they're in their adults, early adult years, and they're jumping straight into all the intensity, drama, and chaos. And the relationship will blow up, or there'll be drama and chaos naturally. And I'll get the questions in my practice of, what went wrong? And I share with them what my therapist always shared with me is like, you don't know that person, and we should really be pumping the brakes on jumping into bed with people, before you know them. Oh. And that's a hot take.
We have a caller.
Oh, we have a caller.
Yeah.
Can we take them in just a minute?
Yeah.
Okay. It's a hot take. All right. But it's necessary. If you're fresh in the dating scene, you're young, you're thinking about getting yourself out there, let someone get to know you, who you are first, before they know you physically. All right. And watch the foundation of a friendship grow. I just heard we have a caller, so I'm going to shut up for a second and we'll take the caller and see if they can impart some wisdom to me.
All right. All right. Hello, caller. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you. Who are we talking to?
Yes. I am host Vic Smooth from the TV Cafe show on the Fishbowl Radio Network. Just want to congratulate you and welcome you from New York to the station.
All righty, brother. Well, thank you for calling in. I appreciate it.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah, and one more time, your name was?
DJ Vic Smooth.
DJ
from the
Vic
TV
Smooth.
Cafe show. Yes.
All right, cool. I'll have to check it out. Thanks for welcoming me, brother. Appreciate it.
Oh, no problem, man. And enjoy your show. Have fun. It's always a pleasure having new artists coming to the podcast station.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
All
righty, brother. Well, have a
welcome.
good night, man.
All right, you too, man.
Yeah. Thank you. DJ
All right.
Vic Smooth.
Yep.
Check him out on the Fishbowl Radio Network. We'll be broadcasting live here on this show, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Vic Smooth's profile is also on the website, so if you jump over there, you'll be able to find his show as well. We were talking about intimacy, weren't we?
Yes.
What do you think of that concept?
I love what you said, into me.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is we recently just had a show and we were talking about soul ties. And I feel like that goes great into knowing a person before you lay down with them, because you need to know what you're getting yourself into, for lack of better words. Know what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I really like how you broke that down.
Yeah, it can be a real unmanageable problem sometimes, you know, and I'm not sitting here talking like I'm above it either. My therapist had to share it with me. Especially if you're looking for support, we were talking a moment ago about loneliness and isolation. It's like, what are the number one things people are going to turn to when they're lonely and isolated? You know, substances.
Yeah.
You know, some may turn to video games and maybe some more innocent things like that. And that's a topic for maybe another podcast, because I like video games. But sex is a big one, you know, and those things are great, but companionship is better.
Yes.
You know, yeah, connection and intimacy, getting to know a person and sharing your ups and downs. And it's something, it's pervasive in our society today. You see a lot of people struggling with that. They're feeling really lonely. Percentages in our country, I'll give you this. It's like a link to non-vulnerability in our society is clearly substance use. Right, and in our country alone, in the U.S., since the year 2000, we're approaching something like I think when it's published this year, it's 1 million people will have overdosed from heroin. And I don't mean to like bring the mood down or anything, but it's important to know, right? Because another statistic, right, that I operate with a lot of my practice is that the U.S. citizens age 12 and older, 50% of them have drank to excess in the last year. 50%. All right. Another 20.4% of them have a alcohol use disorder. All right. And another 20.17 or something like that percent have a heroin use disorder. And so substance, it's kind of like I explain it to my clients who have loved ones who struggle with substances, is like when you're walking down the street, it's highly unlikely that you're not going to pass at least somebody who is struggling that day with substance use. And they need support. Our system isn't really designed to provide that support, but we have some really good things in our country today that you could turn to if you needed that support. And maybe right now I'll shout a few of those things out. If you're struggling with substance use today to an unmanageable point where you're sick, go to the hospital. All right. Look up detoxes in your area and get your ass into treatment now. Yeah. It's dead serious, right? I was talking with someone the other day about delirium tremens, and this is the point when you've drank yourself to a point of jitters, right? And jitters is putting it nicely. You know, you're going to have hallucinations, you get the shakes, you're going to be vomiting uncontrollably, your liver could fail. There's all kinds of problems. You need to get to a hospital. If you're messing around with heroin, let me be the arbiter of truth here. Stop. All right. Yeah. Get yourself checked in somewhere and take care of yourself if you can, if you're ready. You know, you're probably, if you are messing around with that stuff right now, you're probably not listening to me on a Friday night. But if you are, just by the off chance that God said, hey, go listen to this goofy mofo on this radio network, get yourself checked in. Detox is the first stop if you're sick. We have residential programs. All right. Just in the Dallas area alone, you know, I was kind of looking before I came on the show. There's 10 or 15. I'm not going to shout out them directly, but just go on Google, all right, wherever you are in the world, and type in residential treatment. If you're not detoxing and you need treatment, residential is your next step, and they'll walk you through the process. From that point forward, I would recommend, and this is what I recommend for all my clients, is when you've gotten to the point of treatment or you've stopped using and you've got some significant time under your belt, you need to go to meetings, 12-step recovery meetings. I don't care if it's AA, NA, or just any 12 step with an A in it. You need to get your butt in the rooms and sit in those seats. And I'll give you a breakdown. I had a guy I've been working with for 4 years. And when he first came to me, he was a heroin addict, and we met in treatment. But when I transitioned into private practice and he continued with me, my objective with him was to get him a community, like we were talking about earlier, because when it comes to substances, if you don't have a community around you, you're not going to last very long. I can't tell you why that is. It just is, right? So my objective with him is get him in meetings 5 days a week. 5 days a week. And I told him, I said, I don't care if you go every hour on the hour, every single one of those days, you go to one of them a day, but you need to be in those rooms 5 days a week, and you need to come here once a week to see me in therapy. And he did that. For the first 2 years, he went to meetings 5 days a week, and he came and saw me once a week. And he celebrated 4 years last month.
Oh, that is so good. What a blessing to watch a young man's life change too. Yeah. It's powerful stuff. And I don't share any of that to sing my praises, because there's probably clinicians listening as well over time that you guys do that work too. You already know. But for those who don't know, 12-step recovery is extremely important for those who are struggling with substance use. And if you know them, if you have an addict in your life or an alcoholic, someone who's struggling with substances, you're not alone either. There are 12-step recovery programs for you as well. They're called Al-Anon, and I would highly recommend them. And the reason that is too in our society is because one of the biggest, I would say, arbiters of relapse for the alcoholic is people averting their consequences. All right, I think our society is very much in the business of prevention. All right. And so a lot of things are kind of like removing consequences, and the family is a big culprit of that, because we love them, we care, and my hands are not clean in that department. And when we get out of the way of the alcoholic, this is what I teach people in my clinical practice. When we get out of the way, they experience their consequences for themselves, but so do we. All right. And we get a chance on our end to see ourselves, right? To see the reflection of, why am I trying so hard to help this person get better? What do I selfishly or self-centeredly need from this? Control.
Yeah, that's the big one, isn't it? It's so hard to let go.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. When you think of letting go, if we circle back to that for a minute, T, you mentioned God, and we jumped around to a few other topics, but I'm curious if you could how do you utilize your girls, and your friend group and God to help you let go? I guess I'm assuming a lot here in the sense of, like, if you have someone in your life that sometimes you have a hard time letting go of, but if not, how would you?
I'm going to say this because I know he's not watching,
okay.
But my dad, I find myself trying to protect him a lot. And I find in doing that, I'm realizing that I'm in the way of what God is trying to do, and so I'm sorry, I got sidetracked. What was the question again? Because I was like, oh my gosh.
No, it's good. Yeah. First, I appreciate the honesty.
Yeah.
How do we utilize God and our friends to help us let go of those difficult things with our loved ones?
How do we utilize them? I definitely, I try to use my cousin as an example. She has had to deal with letting go of her mother, who has an drug abuse issue. And it was tough for her, for sure. But seeing the way that she has been able to become stronger from that, I use that as a motivation. And I talk to her about it and saying, like, hey, I'm in this situation where I'm like, I need to protect my dad. I need to protect him. But she's like, you have to let go. Yeah. So using those people and those things as an inspiration, and also knowing that God controls everything. So I have no way of possibly anything I do is not going to matter at the end of the day, because if he doesn't do it, then, it's not going to get done.
Yeah. So, they talk about that in in the 12 and 12, it's the 12 concepts, 12 traditions in AA of like be the hole in the donut, right? It's like the challenge for us as people is like, how do I give everything to God, right? Or a higher power, like everything, so that I'm not managing anything. It's like, if you're anything like me, it's like, I'll give you this and
just a little bit.
yeah. But like this one, I like it a little too much. I'll talk to you about that one later, God. Or I'll manage to like turn everything over that day and everything's going smooth. And I'll be like, all right, God, I'm going to take the steering wheel back. And all of a sudden I'm in the ditch again, you know? And I totally get that, wanting to protect the people that we love, you know? In knowing, it's like, how do we know, like there's no way to know that they are protected and that things are going to be okay. That's kind of the whole crux of the issue, right? Is like things are not okay. And in the first 60 pages of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, this gentleman, he goes to a world-renowned psychologist, and that psychologist's name is Carl Jung. And he looks at him, and I mean, like, I don't know how to relay, like, this is like the pinnacle of like psychologists ever to walk this earth. And he looks at this well-to-do, you know, businessman who has all of these resources, and he's come to Carl Jung to ask him, like, how do I get better? And he says, you're hopeless. He says, there's only one thing I've ever seen that will help the alcoholic get better, and that's some kind of uncontrolled spiritual awakening. And as a clinician myself with a lot of years under my belt, I'm not sold on the fact that there's anything better than that. It's never been proved. There's no evidence that there's any treatment outside of AA that works to keep an alcoholic sober. It hasn't been invented yet. Right? AA has, right? So that's why we recommend it. But so this gentleman, he goes to what was back in the day called the Oxford groups, which were kind of like, you know, really uppity, churchy kind of groups. But the significance of it is he then goes and has some version of a spiritual awakening, kind of, we in the clinical realms, we accept that as like he had a spiritual awakening. Then he meets this gentleman called Ebby Thatcher, and kind of spreads the word of like, here's what I'm trying to do to stay sober. And then he talks to a guy named Bill Wilson. And Bill Wilson is the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. And Bill Wilson often talks about like being struck by lightning, like a bolt of lightning. He's standing on a hill one day, and he kind of feels like God is telling him, like, brother, you're screwed unless you do this. And it's like, I feel like sometimes that's how we let go. It's like Bill Wilson was like one of the most degenerate alcoholics that anybody could ever imagine, and God got through to him, you know? That doesn't really help us with our feet on the ground day to day, though, does it? Not all the time, huh?
Not all the time. I definitely agree with that too. I feel like there comes a point where we hit rock bottom and we're like, okay, something has to give, and then we seek out that God or that higher power. And we have to realize, okay, at this point I have to put myself aside because I've been destroying myself, so something else has to come in and help me.
And that's kind of like that's what I specialize in my practice. I used to work in crisis intervention treatment hospitals. I've worked in places like the Salvation Army. Currently, I have a private practice, and the referrals that I get are individuals who are, if it's primary mental health, they're either maybe not being medication compliant, or if they're struggling with substances, they're not ready to take the leap and go into recovery. Or I would say the bulk as well are family members who are struggling with watching their loved ones not take the leap to accept recovery. And my job as a therapist, and I'm very compassionate with it, I like to think, but also very firm, is we have to take action, right? So if we come back to the skill that we were talking about at the beginning of the night, it's like, okay, somebody comes to a therapist, they have awareness, right? Or at least they're in the vicinity. They know every time they go around the block, something's whacking them in the back of the head. I probably should figure out what keeps hitting me, right? And so the awareness starts to build. And then it's a process of accepting, you know, here's the information as to why maybe, let's say it's a family member who's struggling with an alcoholic. It's like, here's the information as to why you're in pain when you watch them go through this. And that takes a lot of acceptance. Takes a lot of strength to look at ourselves and be as honest as you've been in here tonight, T. It's like getting people to be that honest is kind of part of the whole beginnings of therapy as well. Is like, you know, there goes my beard on the mic again. You know, it's okay to talk about these things and know that we're in good company. People are in pain too, and this is an epidemic in not just our country, but in the world. So, you know, you're not alone in feeling upset. The three big ones that get talked about in a program like Al-Anon are feeling unwanted, unloved, and alone. That the person that you love is choosing a substance over you. Yeah. And recovery, right? This is why I'm such a proponent of it in my clinical practice and recommending people in that direction, is because recovery gives you a community of people who show you your value and your divine spark, if you will, like your power and what you have control over. And one of the foundational points that I work with people in recovery in these regards is you can't cure it, you didn't cause it, and you can't control it.
Yes.
You know? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's worth spreading on this podcast and talking about tonight, because there's still a lot of people out there who need to hear that message. And I'll give a frame of references. You know, I was 7 years into being a therapist before I heard that message, you know, and I had a logical understanding. I'd read all the books, you know, I was doing all the research, and still the place of awareness, it was just like this line in the table. It was just on the other side of that line. Yeah. Like it was foggy. I could see that there were some problems in the way I was behaving. And it took that rock bottom that T was talking about. It does for any client I've ever worked with. It takes that rock bottom to admit, you know, maybe I need to do something to take care of myself. And that's what therapy's all about. That's what treatment's all about. That's kind of what this whole racket is all about. You know, is finding that rock bottom, accepting that rock bottom, and so, because if you don't, that rock bottom will come up and find you, won't it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You joining us, Sammy?
I don't know. You got my mic up, T?
We have another visitor in here.
Yeah.
We're gonna get Sammy all
Am
set
I good?
up here.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be on the camera though.
Yeah, welcome in,
But
Sammy.
I'm going to be in here because I love your show. I'm listening,
Yeah.
and I just love it. I love you and
It's
T and the
so
way you
good.
interacting.
It's
Yes.
wonderful, isn't it?
It's-
Teaser.
it's-
I was gonna say T's a natural.
Yes.
All right?
Thanks.
I'm sitting here like, you know, before it started, I'm like, you know, I asked her if I could banter with her. And
Uh-huh.
she's over here bantering and chopping me up instead.
There you go. And I'm watching you guys on Facebook, and I heard you on the stream, and I heard a few people call in to welcome you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been great.
I got
Shout
some
out
of my
to Victor
girls.
from New York. He does his
Yeah.
show from New York
Yeah.
called TV Cafe, and he called you all the way from New York. So
Nice.
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was really kind of him.
Yes.
So what do you liking that you heard from over there in your office?
Well, I love, just the fact that like you're bringing in you're very calm and you're very approachable, and I like that. Just people that are struggling with addiction and how, they have to let go and let God in a sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I know when we met off the air, when we first met, I let you know that I really dived into Al-Anon and dove into everything about Alcoholics Anonymous and AA, because I had family members that had struggled with that addiction. And it's just hard, when you are on the outside and on the peripheral and the family members and what to do, and especially if you're a control freak like me.
Yeah. You're in good company.
Yeah, I heard you say that. I heard you say it's like
Yeah.
you want to tell them what to do. You want to tell them what to say.
Yeah. And that gets a bad rap too, because we mean well.
Yes.
It just doesn't work.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a hard thing to do the letting go and give our listeners, because you are trained in this. You are a clinician and you are a specialist. you know, what are some of the steps that somebody that's listening right now that's dealing with that situation can do? What are some steps of how can you let go?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Maybe
That
something
is.
simple, you know, and then if they
Yeah.
want to dive in a little deeper, they can get in touch with you personally.
Yeah.
But where do you start?
Yeah, I think.
And look at them. Let them know.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. If you're looking to let go, we have this concept in therapy circles and in clinical settings, but also in recovery, of let go and let God. And that process doesn't start the let God part until you're well into a recovery process. And so if you're starting, the first step is powerlessness. What we have to do is admit powerlessness over the alcoholics or the addicts in our life, or the gambler, or the person with mental health struggles, or if you have a loved one who's on the spectrum. It's like whatever the unmanageable problem is that you can't control, we have to admit powerlessness over it. How do we admit powerlessness? I always share with my clients who they're not in recovery programs to get real honest with themselves about the 3 things they can control in their lives. And there's 3 of them, and one's an exception. Number 1 is how you choose to feel about yourself. Number 2 is how you choose to behave. And number 3 is raising small children. But once they grow, you're out of luck, right? They're going to live their own lives. And so we get really clear with ourselves about the 3 things that we can control, and anything outside of that list, you're powerless over.
Wow.
All right? Anything. And this comes back to what T and I were talking about earlier of, being the hole in the donut. I'm nothing. I'm no one. God's the manager, or whatever version of a higher power, or whatever brings you peace and comfort at the end of the day. If it's outside of that list that you can control, turn it over. Give it to another manager. Let someone else deal with it. At the very least, give it back to the person who does have control over it. If it's somebody that you love and it's their substance use, give it to them. All right? If you're the person struggling with substances, and your parents or your loved one or your friends won't give you money, let it go. All right? Well, that's a really difficult one. And again, I said earlier, if you're in that place, you're probably not listening to me. But if you are, and you're starting down that path, we'll come back to a point from earlier of radical honesty. Get honest with yourself and others, and that's your first path, which comes back again to the loved ones. Right? If you're real honest about the things you can control, right, then you got a real good shot of admitting powerlessness. And I'm not saying that that's easy, but it is powerful. All right? If you can get a grasp on the things that you control in your life, things get better, truly. And it's the bedrock. I'll put it like this. I share this with my clients as well. It's the bedrock foundation of your self-esteem, to take control of what you can control and let go of the rest. Because when we try to manage and take control of other people and what they're doing and what the world is doing, and this person cut me off on the road and how dare them, and that's when we lose all of our control and power in our lives. It's when we start to lose our sense of self, and we start to lose our identity. And if you want that self-esteem, if you're struggling with that, admit powerlessness, and do that by taking control of those 3 things. If you got kids, take care of them. If you got teenagers, good luck. I heard some... Would you add anything to that, Sammy?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Before we move on, I want to give a shout out to some people that are listening to the show right now. Sipwina Banda, Renisha Woods, Rebecca Dollinger, Stephanie Ramirez, Susan Hyatt, and Valerie Scarborough. So thank you guys for listening to Alan. It's his debut show today called Breaking the Cycle.
Yeah.
And one thing that I noticed on here on this thread is, and that I notice usually, it's the females that really like to hear this type of content in these shows. But we were talking, in our conversation again when we first met, how because a lot of the men have been raised in society that they can't express their emotions or be vulnerable, or it's, you're weak, or don't cry, or you're not a man, and all these things. A lot of times men won't seek that therapy, won't seek the help that they need, and it's so vital that they do. So everything that you were saying and giving that first step was awesome.
Yeah.
And there's so many topics I know that you're going to talk about as the show continues and goes on. This is the first of many. I want to hear about boundaries. I want to hear about, how can men get out of that mental block of feeling that they can't seek a therapist or be vulnerable.
Yeah.
There's just so many topics I know you're going to be bringing to the forefront to the listeners all around the world and all around the United States here, and I'm excited.
I'm looking forward to it, and I agree with you too. Therapy, the target audience typically is more female these days. So, if you're watching live, just put it on the background where your husband or your boyfriend can see it. You're like, hey, check out this one. I'm kidding. They'll find it in their own way. And also, if you are a concerned listener and you want your man to listen to this, tune in, right? Let him know. We're here live, 7 p.m. Have him call in. We'll be giving the number here and there. Probably in the next show, we're going to give the number. And so, have him call in. I'll check him. I'll talk to him.
And how do people get in touch with you, Alan, if they want to meet you privately in your private practice? What do they have to do to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so if you'd like to find me, the website I gave earlier, therapy@alanhyde.com. There's more information like this as well. I post blogs. I do little things here and there between the episodes where I talk about different topics. You can find my information there. And I do have a pretty full practice, so if at the time I don't have a space but you really want one, just communicate with me, or I can give you referrals. And sometimes that's the best way to go about it too. I'm very connected both here in the Dallas area and also to a lot of clinicians around the U.S. So if you are looking for therapeutic support or recommendations on treatment, there's a contact button all over the website when you go to therapy@alanhyde.com.
We have a caller.
Do it.
So let me answer that.
All right. We're right up here at the end too.
Yeah. Hello. Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Who are we talking to?
My name is Renisha. I thought I probably should call instead of just overloading the comment section because I have a question.
Yeah. Well, hello, Renisha. Good evening.
Good evening. My question is this. When you have a spouse that has very addictive personality and they're everything becomes addictive. They stop at a store and then they have to keep stopping at that store constantly because they have that addictive personality. How will a wife assist with, helping walk their husband through the healing of it when the husband doesn't admit that they have that?
Yeah, I say this with all the grace and the love. I'm going to look at you right here. We can't. The first thing we can do is let go. And what I would recommend for a loved one is, if you're looking for support, if you're looking for answers on how to take care of yourself in that, and to let go of their behaviors, is to if you go on Google or anywhere that you search and type in Al-Anon meetings in my area, that's AL-ANON, those are the people that have the answers. And I promise you this, they will support you, they'll love on you, and they'll give you all kinds of resources to help you navigate it emotionally. Behaviorally, there's not much we can do to stop him, but there's a whole lot that those people can do to give you answers to support you. And that's what I would recommend, Renisha.
So you're saying that the behavior that he has can't be changed?
He has to change it.
He has to want to change it.
Yeah, and that's...
Obviously, he has to want to change. What can she do, though, to kind of start guiding him towards that without being that nagging wife?
Yeah, don't...
Exactly.
Don't nag. Don't bring it up as best you can. Don't nag.
Does he want to get help?
He may, and that's the challenge, right? We don't know if they want help yet, but we got to get out of their way. All right. And so when I have a client come in, that's the first place, is kind of like, where can we get you support so that when he is behaving that way, when he's having a hard time, you have support.
And to the caller, have you asked him if he wants to get help?
No. Well, and that's mainly what what I led out with, when they don't believe that they have an addictive, whatever, an addiction. So
he hasn't admitted it yet.
But, yeah, hadn't admitted it, but everything goes along with it. I mean, it can be, we'll stop at one store, and then we have to stop at that store going forward for the next few years because everything becomes addictive personality.
Yeah. Okay. So I see what you're saying. It's not just substances. It's patterns of behavior.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. You know, and they say in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, right, that, you know, they tell this to the alcoholic, right? We don't want to be quick to identify the other alcoholics, but we can be quick to identify ourselves. And so there's no way to get him to identify that for himself, but if he was willing to be honest with himself, I'm sure it wouldn't take too long. But there's nothing we can do outside of that process to get them to see that they need to look at that. And that's also why there's so much pain around this, especially in our culture, is because we do care and we do love them. And I hear it, Renisha, as you're sharing, like I hear that you really care and you want to know. And
Yeah.
the bummer, I would say, where the hope comes in later is that it's not our job to know, it's our job to love them and to get out of the way.
Woo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds so easy, Alan, but it's not.
Yeah, no. And I'll tell you this, Renisha, it's the same thing I tell my clients is this is some of the hardest stuff we'll ever have to do, you know, is move out of the way, especially because we do love these people so much. So my heart goes out to you. And
Wow.
if you're looking for more information on that too, because I know I gave you some really preliminary information, I would encourage you to reach out on my website. I put information there as well, but Al-Anon those are the people that are going to have more answers for you.
Okay. So to sum it up, love them and get out of the way.
Yeah. You know, we have this joke in recovery circles of, you know, before when they were passed out laying on the ground, I would step on them and over them to get on my bed, and now I put a blanket on them, you know.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's not personal. They're not using to hurt you. They're not engaging in those behaviors to hurt you.
It's an illness.
Yeah. It's an illness, and it affects us too. All right. And this is what I teach my clients is when we're around it, it affects us too. So we need support as well. And you're not alone. You're loved as well.
Oh, thank you so much. Boy, this is really helpful. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Congratulations on your new show. I know you'll help a lot of people.
Oh, thank you, Renisha. I really appreciate you calling in.
Thank you, Renisha. Do you think by
You're welcome.
sharing, you know, by sitting down with your loved one and you know, at the right timing and just saying, you know, this behavior that you have really affects me in this way, and because you're my partner and clearly partners, you know, you love me, would you be willing to go see someone to talk about it a little bit further? Because it is affecting me as well.
You could try that. I would recommend against it. They talk about this in the big book too of, you know, if they're in the throes of active use, they're not going to, you're too close. They're not going to hear it from you. And so they've really got to want it to be able to hear it from somebody that they love. I think the biggest thing we have to trust is that at a certain point when we get out of the way, the consequences is what is going to wake them up.
Gotcha.
All right. So
All right.
it's the consequences that is going to lead to the awareness. So with all love and grace and respect, we got to get out of the way. And I know how hard that is. But other than that, I think we're going to kind of conclude here tonight. But I really appreciate you guys who called in and who are listening. We're live here on Fishbowl Radio Network, Breaking the Cycle, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, and we look forward
Every Friday.
Yeah, every single Friday, and we look forward to sharing more knowledge with you. So, love you guys. Thank you.